Our speaker is Joseph Grenny, an amazing change maker, an unbelievable entrepreneur and social entrepreneur, and we'll be introducing him in just a minute. This is the last speaker in this series. We have one more session next week, but that is our Shark Tank night, and we have 5 student businesses that will be presenting to a panel of judges and investors, and it's one of our favorite nights, so it also counts towards your for credit for being here in the class. So next week, be sure to come. That's our final visit. Tonight's our final lecture. It's hard to believe that it's over with. When we started this series, I told you, I said, our promise to you is that this will be the best 1-hour credit class you'll ever take at Utah State University. So we're at the end of this series. I want to hear from you. Has it been the best class you've taken? Yeah. 1 credit hour. Okay. I can't hear you. What was that? Okay. Well, thank you for coming. Thanks for your enthusiasm. Thanks for your great questions. We think we've had fabulous speakers, and we've learned a ton, right, about how to start and build a business and how to apply those skills even in your career. So what we like to do tonight on our second to the last night, we have a few awards we want to give out. And the first award we're going to give out is unique. It's the first time we've done this. But we thought it would be really cool to give an award out called the Coolest Dean in the World. And we searched the world, the United States, we searched overseas, and we were looking for a dean that has had an incredible, remarkable impact on changing the trajectory and the culture of a business school. And we were pleased that when all the data came in and we looked at multiple candidates, the winner of that award is our own Dean, Doug Anderson. And I've stayed here as long as I have because of Doug and his leadership. I absolutely love the Huntsman School of Business. We have an incredible culture. We love each other. There are no silos. We work together. But most important, we really care about our students. Students are our #1 priority. And we might be great scholars. We might write great articles or books. But if we're not great with students in the classroom and mentoring students that need help, no, there's not a role for us in the Huntsman School. And Doug has made that very, very clear. But he's really an amazing leader. He got his PhD from Harvard University. Then he taught at Harvard for almost 10 years. And then he started the Center for Executive Development, and he was the managing partner of a very successful firm that worked with AT&T, Johnson & Johnson, General Electric, and many of the Fortune 500 companies. And he's been here 20 years. This is his 20-year anniversary. And he's stepping down as the dean, but he is going to stay on. He's going to go to Oxford and do some work and come back and teach leadership in the business school. So I want my team to come up here, Andy, Kim, or Andy and Paige, everybody come on up here from the Center for Entrepreneurship. And as a center, we're going to give this award to Doug Anderson. So come on up, don't be shy. And Doug, come on up. So the award, this is really a very prestigious award. It's only been given to one person in the entire world. Coolest Dean, Doug Anderson.
Wow.
We love you, Doug.
Thank you, Doug. Great.
Congratulations,
Thank
Doug.
you, guys. Thank you so much.
Doug, if you'd stay up here with us. We now give an award out, the Entrepreneur of the Year Award, and we're looking for an entrepreneur that's had a major impact on society, particularly in Utah. And let me tell you a little bit about our recipient, Joseph Grenny. Joseph started an organization called Crucial Learning in 1990, and it's an online training and development company. They train organizations in communication, positive, productive skills, relationship skills, leadership skills. They have 20,000 trainers around the world, so it's a worldwide organization. And they've taught millions of people how to improve their skills and be more civil and be more successful in organizations. They have taught 1/2 of the Forbes Global 2000 companies, which is amazing. I don't know if there's another consulting company that has done that. But that's just the beginning. He then started with some partners an organization called Unitas, which is an international nonprofit that helps teach self-reliance and life skills to people all over the world, and it's impacted about 50 million people. Next, he started, this is where I met him, he started what the organization called the Other Side Academy, and it's a very unique organization. It's a residual training and treatment program for people that have committed crimes. So people with a history of criminal records, drug addicts, homeless individuals. And the reason I love the organization, and I got involved with Joseph right from the beginning, is one of the secret formulas is entrepreneurship. So these felons and homeless individuals, drug addicts, they start businesses and then they manage those businesses, and that's really the therapy. They learn to get up on time, they learn to work hard, they learn to give phenomenal service. They've got a moving company, they've got a building company, they've got thrift stores, and if you look at anything, the Other Side Academy, Builders, Other Side Academy, and so on Yelp, you'll see they're getting 5-star reviews from hundreds of people because they give phenomenal service. Joseph then took that same model and is now applying it to the homeless problem. They're building a village of more than 400 tiny homes, and homeless individuals that have been on the streets for 10 years or more will be living in these facilities, and they're being trained in how to put their lives back together and how to become decent individuals. And it's just an absolute amazing solution. It's a model to the world of how we deal with this problem. And so Joseph is an amazing innovator. One more very important thing, throughout his career, he's written 10 books, and 4 of those have been New York Times bestsellers. So Crucial Conversations, Crucial Influence, Crucial Accountability, I think it is. And 7 million copies have been sold. It's being used at universities across the world. It's being translated into 28 languages and being used in 36 countries. So in giving this award to you, we want to tell you that try to be like Joseph Grenny when you grow up, okay? He's our role model. And if we could all even strive to just use our values to do good in the world, think of the changes that we could make. So we'd like to have President Mortensen, the president of the university, come join us up here. We are so excited to have President Mortensen here. He's going to be a phenomenal new leader of this university. And we'd like to have Celia come up, and Joseph. So why don't you give it to him, Doug? So here's the award. And I think we have someone that's going to take a picture.
And if you guys, everyone move forward to your head. So you're not in there, that's from.
Okay, I hope you got it. All right. Okay, so thank you very much. And the rest of the evening is Joseph Grenny, one of the most amazing entrepreneurs I've ever met in my life and my career. And he's going to make a presentation, and then he's willing to answer lots of questions. And we may stay a little bit longer tonight because this is really a rare opportunity for us to have Joseph here. So let's join in welcoming Joseph Grenny, our Entrepreneur of the Year.
Good evening. Sound carrying back there all right? I have a big ambition for our time together. I don't want to recite a bunch of stuff we've done in the past. My goal is to empower you to change the world. I want to share with you a couple of things which those of you in this room that feel called to try to solve some social problems, if you'll keep these in mind, at the point at which you have an exit, which, heaven hope that you have some great organization that you start and that you're able to be rewarded for your good hard work. My experience is that there are a lot more people that are good at building businesses than at changing the world. There are a lot of people that accumulate a lot of money and then don't put it to a particularly strategic use, so it really doesn't make them that much of a difference. And so I'm going to share with you a couple of ideas that I hope you'll keep in mind so that when that day comes, you'll be able to guide the kind of change that this world desperately needs. So the title is Why Social Services Fail and How We Can Succeed. This is the Other Side Village. We'll talk a little bit about it, but again, my goal isn't just to focus on that. I'm going to use that as a context to share these ideas. The Other Side Village, as Mike shared, will eventually house about 500 people who've been chronically homeless, 10 years and longer frequently. There are beautiful homes in the village. The village is growing nicely, but that's not important. What's important is the concept, the principles inside the village, because there are many social problems that suffer the same way. For example, this one. Take a look at that picture and see what it tells you. Tonight isn't just about the village, it's about how we solve problems generally. Problems like generational poverty or incredible income inequality, a world that just isn't working for everybody. Problems like criminal recidivism or drug addiction or homelessness. Our current system doesn't work particularly well. There are enormous examples of it. You're going to be paying a great deal of taxes, those of you that have great incomes in the future, but very few people understand how little is produced for so much of what we pay on a regular basis. Here's an example of how the system doesn't work. So this is a dear friend of my wife and myself. Her name is Melissa Hepworth. This is her in 2016 as she got arrested. And at that point, she'd already struggled with occasional homelessness for about 10 years. And then over the next 10 years, it just continued. But I want you to watch this recipient of all the best of what our social service system has to offer. She accessed every service that you could imagine. And this is the next picture in the sequence. This is the next. This is the next. And this is the next. It's a descent into hell that cost a lot of money. And that a lot of well-intended people that really wanted to help out, but were in a deeply broken system, participated in. Now, I was asked to share with you a little bit about why my wife and I got interested in this. I have colleagues here today as well. Kathy and Tim, raise your hands, without whom none of this would have happened. And so I've corrected the why I did this to the why we did this, because it's a we. This is one of the reasons. You've had experiences like this where you've driven past scenes in the United States of America that you thought were unconscionable. And if you haven't yet, you will. It's impossible to drive past that without saying something's got to be done. But here's the second reason. It got very personal for us. So this is an early picture of some of our children and the growing up years. This is Seth and Samuel, two of our boys. And it's hard to describe to those of you that haven't experienced this before what it's like when your precious boys, who you thought were going to go on to do wonderful things in their lives, become mugshots. This was the first time they were arrested. And there were many subsequent arrests. They got involved in crime and addiction, and their lives were falling apart. One of the lowest moments for us was sitting next to our son in the hospital after he overdosed. He wasn't expected to survive the night. His organs were shutting down. He stayed in the ICU for a long time and in rehab long after that, and then relapsed shortly thereafter. So it got very personal for us to look at people who are trapped in self-destructive cycles in their lives. Now, there's some religious literature, some sacred scriptures that to us inform us and guide us in our lives. There's a story in one of them about this guy who owned a bunch of olive trees, and one of them starts to decay at some point. And he does everything he can to save them. It's a long, 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 long story. And in that story, there's a recurring theme, and that was when he got discouraged, when he couldn't see anything that he could do, he went to the nethermost part of the vineyard. And he worked somewhere else. And our conviction is when you can't fight the battle you want to fight, you get into the war. Our boys didn't want our help. They weren't interested in what mom and dad had to say, but there was a larger war out there that we could get involved in. And that's how we got here. So that's the why. So there are two things that I want to share with you tonight. One of the reasons that we fail is because we're all working in broken markets. So pay close attention to this because you're subject to this too. So the nonprofit sector, I would argue, having been involved for about 25 years in a lot of work in the nonprofit world, is deeply, deeply broken. And the sickness in that system is not personal. It's not about bad people. It's not about people not trying to make a difference in the world. It's very much structural. Here's the problem in the nonprofit world. I'm going to show it to you, and I want you to kind of get your head wrapped around it. The problem is that this is the structure. So you got a nonprofit. This is a real one from Paraguay. A dear friend of ours, a colleague of ours named Martin Burt, started this organization called Fundación Paraguaya many years ago to try to help people that were caught in cycles of poverty get out. And they decided they were going to make small loans to people to start businesses to increase their income. And over the years, they were very admired as a nonprofit, but were completely broken. And I want you to figure out why. So here's the structural problem. The way the nonprofit world works is you've got donors that put money in, and then you've got clients that receive the service. That's the problem. That structure is deeply flawed and creates a number of problems. One is that markets drive innovation. And since this isn't a market system, this is a weird, broken system where donors provide the money and clients get the service. It's not a market with a feedback loop. This is the way markets work. Markets are a company creates a product or service, a customer either buys or doesn't buy it, and if they don't buy it, that's a feedback loop. You realize you're not doing what the customer wants, and so it gets fixed. So here's what it looks like. You create a movie called Harry Potter, and people line up for it days in advance because they want to see the movie and the sequel. You create a movie called Cats, and nobody sees it. In fact, some of the reviews that came out after Cats that show you how wonderful markets are at providing feedback said things like, "We watched Cats on opening night and lost all 9 lives." Second review, Cats, a Broadway musical adaptation straight out of the litter box. "It is, with all affection, a monstrosity," another review said. So this is what happens in a market. Markets are terrific. They have fidelity because there's feedback in them. You create something that stinks and that people aren't getting benefit out of, and you know it right away. That doesn't happen up there. Markets drive innovation because funding is hardwired into effectiveness. So when the funder is the customer, innovation becomes a routine process. Look at all the incredible technology advances over the last 40, 50 years. That happened because these were happening in a marketplace. And people were saying, well, you can make it smaller, you can make it faster, you can make it better, I'll buy that, I'll buy that. And so more money comes and more innovation occurs. The problem in a non-market system, the problem in the nonprofit world is the disconnection of funding and effectiveness makes innovation an unnatural act. Take that in. Innovation becomes unnatural because funders come in and donate for the thing you're doing today. You're going to help people overcome their mental health problems by petting llamas all day long. And you show lots of pictures of people with mental health challenges and llamas, and the donors cry and they write you a check and everything's great. And they're going to continue to give you checks as long as you've got llamas there, even if llamas don't work. And so what matters is not whether people are getting mentally more healthy. What matters is, do the donors continue to provide funding? Now again, this isn't heartless people in the nonprofits. They want to help people. But the problem is, we start getting into this self-deceptive cycle of looking at a few anecdotes within our nonprofits and convincing ourselves we're doing something good. The reason I know this is the case, and it's epidemic in the nonprofit world, is every single year, there's a list called the worst charities in America published. And the next year, they still exist. And the year after, they still exist. Here they are from one particular year. The Kids' Wish Network, the Cancer Fund of America, Children's Wish Foundation International, America's Breast Cancer Foundation. I mean, who doesn't want to help Americans with breast cancer? Who doesn't want to help? So you look at the name of that, and it will elicit checks. It gets donations. But the problem is, having a name like that doesn't tell you, are they satisfying a need? Are they solving a problem in the real world? Nonprofits sustain funding by feeding donors a steady diet of anecdotes and activity lists. So here's the quiz for you. I want you to try to pay attention here for just a second to see if you can spot the problem, because if you can now, then you're on course for a life of greater productivity and changing the world. The only lasting fix to the problem I'm about to reveal to you is for funding to be tied to true effectiveness, to outcomes. And the nonprofit structure will never make that happen. You as donors have to do it. You have to force it. You have to do the extra work to try to demand outcome accountability. So here's the problem. Fundación Paraguaya that I told you about earlier, making small loans to people to start businesses to increase income in the family. This is their website. I want you to look at it and then tell your partner, somebody sitting next to you, find somebody close and tell them what's wrong with that website. Critique it. What's the problem? And if you can't, you lose. I'm going to give you 20 seconds, so get your head wrapped around it. Ten seconds. All right, let's see what we got. So first let's look at the left-hand side. More than 123,000 clients accessed loans in the middle of the pandemic to continue moving the economy. My critique of that is, who cares? Who cares? They didn't get into the business of making loans. If you ask Martin Burt, why did you start it? It wasn't to make loans. What was his goal? Get people out of poverty. So what I want to see on that website is, what percentage of the people that came in are now out of poverty? I couldn't care less how many people access loans. Second, more than 47,000 enterprising women. That's who they're working with. We currently work with more than 47,000 enterprising women. I couldn't care less. What I care is how many of those enterprising women are moving out of poverty. Does that make sense? Are you getting the point? But you're being fed a steady diet of this. Every nonprofit you work with, you look at the website, you look at their annual reports, and what you're going to see is a bunch of activity crap. And that's precisely what it is. Who cares how many socks you handed out? Who cares how many hygiene kits you handed out? That's not why you donated money. You wanted to improve lives. Now here's the good news. There are people of integrity in the nonprofit world. One, a guy by the name of Luis Fernando Sanabria, one of the senior leaders at Fundación Paraguaya, got a book that I wrote. And that's how I made contact with them. One of the preconditions for changing the world is articulating the results you're trying to create and how you're going to measure them. They read that, and they started taking a good hard look at themselves. And then they said, we need to change how we measure our success. They said, from today forward, we will only declare success if somebody has moved from poverty to the bottom rung of middle class. And they had a specific metric for that. It transformed what they did. They realized sometimes people don't need small loans to improve their businesses. There are other things that they might need. So here's the challenge. When you live in a world where people fund activities instead of outcomes, what you get is lots of activities. You get lots of people that specialize in a little piece of the problem, and they perfect an organization that delivers that piece. So you're trying to help people that are homeless. I want to start a warming shelter because homeless people are cold in the winter. You want to help people that are homeless? I want to create a place that provides mental health services because a lot of them struggle with mental health. You want to help the homeless? I'm going to create a place that does vocational skills training because people often lack those skills. Wrong approach. Each of those is a piece of the problem. Each of those is a little silo. If buying a car was like helping the homeless, this is how you'd buy your car. You'd go get a bumper one place, a seat another place, a carburetor another place, and you take it back home and you got to put it all together. If you're homeless and on the streets and there are 15 agencies, each of which do a small piece of what you need, you're caught in this bewildering bureaucracy that's designed for the convenience of the organizations, not for outcomes. And guess what? When your car doesn't work, the carburetor people are going to tell you it's a great carburetor. The seat people are going to tell you it's a great seat, but the car still doesn't work. In the current system of trying to solve homelessness, nobody is responsible for outcomes. Everybody is responsible for carburetors, bumpers, seats, and steering wheels, and they're terrific. So, how do we solve homelessness? If it's a broken market, your job as funders is to fix it. Here's what you do. You stop paying for activities. If somebody says, here's the little thing that we do that contributes so substantially to an outcome, tell them you couldn't care less. Tell them I don't care if you deliver mental health services. I don't care. What I care is, at the end of your transaction with these people, are they permanently housed, self-reliant, drug-free, and crime-free? Pay them for outcomes. And if they aren't delivering outcomes, find somebody else. So, what we're suggesting is, if you want to transform the current system of serving homelessness, this is just one illustration of a particular social problem. Just create outcome measures. Ignore the rest. Hold every organization accountable for reporting on how many people they took off the street, took them by the hand, and did whatever magic they do in that organization. And then out the other end are people that are permanently housed, self-reliant, drug-free, and crime-free for the next 5 years. It'll transform the system. So that's problem one. Problem two is bad framing. So here's something that we don't even realize that we do. We don't realize that when you step into a problem, you frame it, you define it, you try to articulate what the problem is. So very quickly, I want you to look at this picture again. So here's a bunch of folks in really difficult circumstances, right? Pay attention to the guy in the lower right. He's slumped over with a needle hanging out of his arm, probably been living there for quite a while. My guess is he's been on the streets for at least a decade. And you look at that guy and you say to yourself, I want to help. The first problem that you've got to face is you need to articulate what the problem is. Einstein said if you've got an hour to solve a problem, take 55 minutes defining the problem and 5 minutes solving it. What you and I tend to do is look at that and go, dude, needs housing. Let's create housing. If you move that guy into housing, is that going to fix the problem? Probably not. Probably got mental health challenges. Okay, great. Let's sit him down with a counselor. Let's get him mental health counseling. Is that going to fix it? Probably not. Does he need a job? Does he have trauma? Has he been victimized? Probably the answer to all of those is yes. But what we tend to do is define it narrowly and almost with unconsciously, and then rush in with the solution. We create a nonprofit around a little piece of the problem. So the question is, how do you define the problem? I want to share with you a tool that I hope you'll use from today forward in differentiating types of problems that we ought to care about. First, let's illustrate the wrong way to do it. Here's a well-intended woman from Arizona who says that she wants to make a difference for the homeless.
The Martinez family was the talk of the town 14 years ago.
They open their doors to anyone in the community who needs a place to stay.
ABC's Extreme Home Makeover came to Albuquerque and built the family a brand new home.
Someone from a church here in town nominated us. They found out some of the work we were doing.
Within a week, the show built all of this in the middle of one of the toughest blocks in the city. A new home for the family, a homeless shelter, and they demolished 10 condemned homes that are now newly built low-income housing.
I have to believe that even if we helped change one person's life, that had to have been worth it.
Isn't that terrific? They built housing for the homeless. Isn't that great? And so my guess is this is going to go great. Do you think? Because the problem with homelessness is homes, right? In fact, let's see if we can articulate that better. So this is Gavin Newsom, who's currently the governor of California. This is when he was mayor of San Francisco. Look at the date up on the television screen behind him there. 2008, he's giving a State of the City speech. And now I'm not picking on anybody. This isn't about picking on Democrats or Republicans, because I could get Republicans saying the same thing that Gavin Newsom is about to say. I just want you to hear how rash we are often in articulating what the problem is, how little time we sometimes spend thinking about it.
Bottom line in our city is that we've moved in a different direction. We believe fundamentally that food solves hunger, that shelters solve sleep, and that housing solves homelessness. And if we're going to solve the problem of those that are out on the streets that we define as homeless, we better solve the housing problem if we're going to have an impact. And that's why we established this framework, what we call a 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness in San Francisco.
How long is the plan? 10 years. What's the date? What's 2008 plus 10? How's it going in San Francisco? Yeah, if you've been to San Francisco lately, it hasn't gotten better, it's gotten worse. And so we defined the problem as the problem with homelessness is housing, right? The problem with hunger is food, and that makes sense at some naive level. But what I'm suggesting here is that human services suffer from naive framing, from flawed framing. And so is the problem with those guys on the street that we just saw, housing, job training, or mental health? Well, let's listen in for a second. Here's part B of Lisa Reese's wonderful, well-intended efforts.
I have to believe that even if we helped change one person's life, that had to have been worth it.
But the dream of changing the Trumbull neighborhood is over.
We're enabling too much. Some of the people that we helped the most were the ones that became the most vicious. They became entitled, that we owed them something.
Now, the problem here is not the people she was trying to help, and the problem is not her, it's the frame. The problem is the way she started to define the problem. And so here's the part I want you to take notes on. If you want to try to carry something forward after today so that you are less naive about how you solve problems, here's a wonderful rubric that you can use. There are two kinds of broad problems that you can define. The first is what we'll call an asset problem. So if I've got a brother-in-law whose apartment catches fire and he has no place to sleep, then it's easy for me to think he has an asset problem. He had an apartment, now doesn't have an apartment. Well, I happen to own an apartment that I'm not renting anybody to, so I'll let him stay at my apartment. Problem solved. Make sense? So it makes sense if it's an asset problem. An asset problem is a clean problem. You're hungry, you need food, I have food, I give it to you, and you eat. Problem solved. But there's a second class of problem, and if you're not cautious about identifying when this one enters in, you lose. You create solutions that don't work, like Linda Reese just did. These we call human problems. Human problems are behavioral challenges. These are problems where my habits or my response to life is part of what's getting me into my mess. So my brother-in-law, whose apartment burnt, this is the third time this happened. He tends to fall asleep smoking and drunk, and so he burned one apartment, got evicted from that, now got burned in another one, and is now being evicted from that one. And so me giving him another apartment to sleep in doesn't fix that problem. Human problems are problems where human behavior, the way we show up in life and the way we solve life's problems are part of what's creating it. Now, the problem is that you and I tend not to look at these. We tend to come at these problems and define them all as assets problem. One argument that I want to make tonight is there will be no lasting improvement, not just in chronic homelessness, but in many of the social problems we care about until we abandon the bigotry of low expectations. We tend to look at people and say they have asset problems. That guy just needs housing, and it's my job to fix it for him. And if I show up in that way and fix the asset problem when in fact it's a behavior problem or a human problem, bad things can happen. But you and I tend to think it's my job to fix the asset for them. There's a bigotry in that. There's an assumption that this is a human being who's incapable of solving their own asset problems. And it's far more convenient for us to just fix it and move on. So let's imagine for a moment that you care about her. This is Jen Davis. She's been homeless for a long stretch of her life. She was most recently on Skid Row in Los Angeles in some of the most unspeakable conditions on the planet. And the question is, how would you help her? What I'd like to argue tonight is that when you have human problems to solve, there are certain kinds of communities that are best at that. When the problem is one of human growth, not asset transfer, what's often needed is a peer-run, self-reliant community that intentionally approaches the problem of transforming a life. That unapologetically says the issue here is you learning how to live differently, not just you getting housing. And by enunciating it that way up front, we start attacking the right problem. So once again, here's the Other Side Village. I want to share with you something remarkable that happens when you start solving the right problem. So how many of you have ever heard of the word, of the acronym NIMBY? You ever heard that before? What does NIMBY stand for? Shout it out. Yeah, not in my backyard. Most people say when we try to stand up something to help the homeless, you have NIMBY issues. If we want to put a rehab somewhere, everybody says, not in my backyard. Don't put it by me. Put it on that side of town. That's what tends to happen. Well, guess what happened when we decided to stand up the Other Side Village? We announced to two neighborhoods, the Glendale and Poplar Grove neighborhoods, we were about to have 500 homeless people move in right next door to them. Now, would you guess that they would have brought out the welcome wagon for us? Thrown a party? Said, bring it on? Well, here is the public meeting. This is a city council meeting where the public had a chance to talk about how they felt about us bringing 500 homeless people to live next door to them. I want you to listen to who these two folks are, and then we'll talk about why this is a significant moment.
Good afternoon. My name is Turner Bitton. I'm the chair of the Glendale Neighborhood Council.
My name is Anthony Sudweeks, and I'm the co-founder and co-executive director of the Wallace Stegner Academy. We're a public charter school serving students in grades K through 8. In fact, we're the largest public school west of I-15 in the city. We're located about 2 blocks from the proposed zone change.
So here we've got the head of the community council for one of those neighborhoods who's a political official that runs for office, who's going to venture an opinion about 500 homeless people coming to live next door to his neighbors. What's he going to say? And then we've got a guy who started a charter school that's 2 blocks away from this. Guess what the moms and dads with kids in those schools want him to say? So the difference here is that this is what we were bringing. We're bringing beautiful homes. We're bringing beautiful neighborhoods. I want you to notice the design of that neighborhood. We'll talk about it a little bit different later as well. It's homes around a park-like structure, homes that face inward, where people are aware of each other. But even more importantly, this is kind of the concept plan for the Other Side Village. I want you to notice here that this front part is all the commercial district. We call that downtown Disney. So this isn't residential. This is a commercial area with farmers markets and retail opportunities with donuts available and lots of an activity center and lots of retail, lots of services that people in the local neighborhoods want. And then as we fly over that, we move to the back, you'll see the residential area. It's gated off, it's an HOA, it's a completely different kind of concept. And again, look at the orientation, look at the structure of the village. Our intent with the Other Side Village is to create peer-run, self-reliant communities that transform lives. How do you transform lives? You create tight-knit sub-communities. People who are aware of each other, who are accountable for each other. Here's where life begins at the Other Side Village. It starts as people who are currently in what we call the Other Side Prep School go out to an encampment and find somebody who's been on the streets for a long time. Now, what you don't know about that moment is that magic is happening. Because what's happening is that woman is recognizing Nathan there. She used to be in encampments with him. She knew that he used to be homeless. And a sense of mystery, a sense of curiosity is awakening her. How did he get to where he's at? If she's interested, then she's going to attend what we call Village Connect. She's going to participate in a little orientation about what the village is. And one of the conversations that will happen there between potential future peers of you and yourself is they're going to explain to you, you're going to be there to change your life. It's not to get housing. But boy, if you do, life is terrific. Life is wonderful. And if you agree with that, you come to the Other Side Village Prep School. You don't move straight to the village. You come to a place where we create community. We create peer accountability. Here are folks that are currently in the Other Side Prep School. What happens in the prep school? As you're coming off the street filled with chaos, you feel stressed, you feel victimized, you feel terrified constantly. You may be using drugs, you got mental health challenges, all kinds of things are going on. What's going to happen is you're going to spend between 9 and 18 months there just getting stabilized, getting sober, but most importantly, that third bullet. The most important thing you're going to do there is you're going to learn to hold others accountable, to hold boundaries, to create positive relationships, to work, to learn to live in a village. Now, the question that you're probably thinking is, who are you going to get to lead this kind of place? Well, meet our leadership team, a motley-looking crew. So these are leaders of the Other Side Village. And how do they qualify to be leaders? I want you to pick a face out there. Pick one whose life you can sort of discern was probably incredibly tragic. In fact, you get an intuitive sense of the story. And then I want you to meet them today. These are people who are capable of helping you figure out how to do it because they've done it. Our belief is, as Henry Nguyen said, the great illusion is to think that we can be led out of a desert by someone who's never been there. These folks are qualified to do what they're doing today because they've been in precisely the same circumstances. The way you build a peer-run, self-reliant community that transforms lives is by having people who have been part of a peer-run, self-reliant community that transformed their lives. And as they live in that community, they can mentor you through it. There are times where they're going to tell you to get off your butt and go to work. They have the moral authority to say that because someone said it to them. We had this one incredible moment where someone who was highly skeptical came into the prep school. It was starting to get stressful and hard. And they were about ready to give up until the coach down there, second from the bottom on the left, Jackie, opened up to him and said, I want you to know that I used dirty needles when I was on the street. That person looked down at the abscess scars on her forearms and then stayed because she had the moral authority to say things to that person that nobody else could. So, having entered the community, what happens next is you start to participate in what we call a democratic therapeutic community. This is a community where your peers are responsible to hold you accountable, and they will. They're going to let you know when you're lazy, when you're not doing your part, when it's looking like you're sneaky, you stole some of their canned goods. They're going to call you out on it because you've got to learn how to not be a liar, a thief, a manipulator, lazy, impulsive, and so forth. It's hard to overcome that. It's difficult, but if we can't have a conversation about that being your struggle, then we're going to be defining this as an asset rather than a human problem and not helping you with what you actually need. 3 times a week, we're going to sit in a circle and we're going to have tough conversations. And so I want you to look over here at the guy with the beard, guy by the name of Scott. Guy leaning forward over here on his forearm is a guy by the name of Paul. And in this feedback group that might go on for an hour to an hour and a half, they have a chance to call each other out on things, to help each other see themselves honestly, sometimes for the first time in their lives. And so Paul might be saying to Scott, hey, you know what? When we worked at the donut store the other day, you weren't cleaning the dishes. It's your job to clean the dishes. If you don't clean them, I have to clean them, and that's not fair. Clean your damn dishes. They're going to have that conversation. And Scott can say what he needs to say, but others are going to jump in and let Scott know how they feel about him being lazy. My friends, the way you and I got to where we are in life is by being surrounded by people that expected something of us. The norms of a community are expressed when people hold us accountable. And if you have no accountability, you have no norms. So this is the important human process that helps people strive. No life changes because somebody hands you something. Lives change when we do something we didn't imagine we were capable of doing. It's when we begin to surprise ourselves. And here are some of those surprises over the last years at the Other Side Academy and the Other Side Village. 85% of the people you've seen earlier that come off the streets in terribly chaotic conditions graduate from the Other Side Prep School. 85%. That's a higher graduation rate than Utah State. Just saying. Just saying. And they're doing things that I think many of us would agree are harder than what's being asked of us as students. We run 8 world-class social enterprises. We will be self-reliant financially within the next 3 years. Some of those are the Other Side Donuts. Any of you had to the Other Side Donuts? We got one? Anybody else? Next time you go to Salt Lake City, make a pilgrimage to the Other Side Donuts. And I'll tell you in a moment why. The Other Side Goodies, we're creating a healthy freeze-dried snacks business. The Other Side Inn, a hotel operation that is coming online soon on site. The market at the Village. These are some of the healthy freeze-dried snacks that we're putting out in the marketplace here shortly. We also run a leadership institute. Remarkably, companies have come to realize that they need to have this peer accountability in their cultures. We actually do leadership training to teach them how to create this same thing. How to build a culture of what we call 200% accountability. And we've generated revenues of $70 million in the last 10 years. These aren't pretend businesses. These are the bread and butter of what we do. We are a self-reliant community that transforms lives. And that's why this happened. When the Poplar Grove and Glendale neighborhoods understood what we were bringing, Tyler Bitton showed up and said this.
Good afternoon. My name is Turner Bitton. I'm the chair of the Glendale Neighborhood Council. I'm here tonight to speak in support of the Other Side Village.
These were people who are making things happen, changing their lives. That, combined with their demonstrable effectiveness of their program, it makes me completely comfortable with sharing our future up-and-coming neighborhood with this fantastic organization. Thanks.
Can you imagine the hate mail you'd get as the head of a charter school whose kids were being sent 2 blocks away from this? Unless what you were bringing and supporting was this. One of the most remarkable things in our community is over the last 11 years, we have adult probation and parole coming and administering drug tests to every one of our residents at the Other Side Academy. We haven't had a single dirty drug test in 11 years. We have a standing challenge to Brigham Young University to prove that we are more sober than they are. And I'm confident we'll win. Next, we'll take on Utah State. We'll see how that goes. But what the community came to understand, what Poplar Grove and Glendale came to understand is we're going to be the safest part in that area. We're going to be one of the most beautiful and well cared for communities in that area. They wanted us there because we were bringing assets. Who ever heard of 500 homeless people bringing assets? And the reason we haven't heard that is because we keep defining things as asset problems rather than human problems and solving the wrong ones. So, how do you define the problem? Do not start solving it until you've given deep thought to, is this an asset or is this a human problem? Human services suffer from that kind of bad framing. My friends, you've seen this in your lives as well. When you treat a human problem as an asset problem, we generally make things worse. And expecting too little from those we help destroys the very asset they need most to change their lives, a sense of self-efficacy. When I fix this for you and fix this for you and fix this for you and give you this and give you this and give you this, I kill you. I literally take from you the opportunity to do a hard thing and impress yourself and develop a sense of efficacy and self-respect that will create your future. This is where lives change. This is the Other Side Donuts. Now you'll recognize it and you'll know when you find it. But this is how lives change. The guy you're going to see in the video here, a guy by the name of Gideon, had been homeless for much of the previous 26 years of his life. And this is where lives change.
Hey guys, this is Emmy.
It's the stress of a rush of customers. It's having a lazy coworker. It's a product that isn't quite right. It's all the normal stresses of life. If you want people to learn to live in a healthy community, help them practice living in a healthy community. That's the human problem. That's the human solution that we need to work toward. Well, the donut shop launched, and in the last months that it's been open, has generated $800,000 in revenue. This cheeky group got together and said, you know what, we make pretty good donuts. In fact, we think we make the best donuts in Utah. Now, you may not be aware that every year in Utah, we hold the Academy Awards of Donuts. The Academy Awards of Donuts is called the Utah Dough Show. And all of the major producers of donuts show up and compete for the coveted crowd favorite award. And this group got together and said, let's compete. Let's go out. I'm embarrassed to admit to you that when that idea came up, I tried to shut it down. I said, I don't want the group to get discouraged. I don't want them to show up and lose first year out and get depressed and just quit and give up. And then I realized what I was doing. Failure is part of growth. The opportunity to go out there and come back in last place is what makes you screw up your courage and go at it again the next year. And so I backed out of the way, and the group got together and created a number of really wonderful looking potential recipes. But then they created the Mona Lisa of donuts. They put this sucker together, an homage to Utah, and said, let's go compete. They got a booth at the show. They had to stand in the aisle encouraging people to taste theirs, telling them a little bit about the donut shop and giving them a coin so that they could go vote for their donut. It's a hot and heavy competition. And in the end, they won. They won the first year out, the crowd favorite award. Now, I want you to go ahead and applaud. It's for them. It's incredible. Look at that. Now, I want you to imagine that you're Gideon. What's he feeling in that moment? Nobody giving you a housing voucher, giving you a pair of socks, or handing you a hygiene kit creates what he's getting right now. And that is, I worked for this. I achieved this. I deserve this. I deserve a place in the world. People change when they can claim a place in the world that they never thought was imaginable before. So how do you help Jen Davis? Jen Davis was staggering around on Skid Row in Los Angeles, and one day was staggering across the street high on something or other and got hit by a car, smashed. She said the last thing that she thought as she went unconscious was, thank God it's over. She said when she woke up many days later in the ICU, her first thought was, God must still want me here. And so she set out to try to figure out why. That set her on an odyssey that eventually landed her at the Other Side Village in Utah. Now, she had a lot of problems to solve. She was using a rusty walker. She was staggering around and had a difficult time even moving. She was so filled with hardware that she couldn't imagine being able to be productive again in her life. But after working in the prep school, an environment where something was expected of her, she rose. She found something in herself that she didn't know was there before. And she became this woman, a woman that was always in there. I want to let her describe what she does today at the Other Side Village.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Davis, and we're here at the Other Side Donuts. We're a nonprofit helping people come out of chronic homelessness. I'm the retail operations manager here. My duties include logistics, event planning, coordinating large orders.
Who would have thought there was a retail logistics manager in there? Can you imagine? And when she finds that there is a retail logistics manager in there, can you imagine how that transforms a life? It was always a human problem, not an asset problem. And assets were destroying it. This is an incredible moment. She's sitting down with a figure some of you may recognize. Call out a name if you recognize him. Yeah, so we've got Governor Cox sitting there, and she's holding court with Governor Cox. These are those moments where she gets to look at herself and say, how did I get here? and gets to claim and recognize that possibility was always in there. She said this to Governor Cox, and I hope you carry this with you long after tonight. She said, before coming to the village, my caseworker, a well-intended person from a social service agency, told me I was permanently disabled. They said it with a look of glee on their face, like they were announcing something terrific. They said that was fine because he could get me disability benefits so I could get free housing and live without working for the rest of my life. That was a moment of potential murder, the murder of a soul, an unintentional, unwitting murder, but a murder nonetheless. Because if she had bought that line about herself, she would have slid into that bigotry of low expectations of herself, the same way the whole system tends to. That wasn't good news. That was soul-crushing news. And something inside of her bridled against it. Something inside her felt offended about it. And so she worked and eventually graduated from the prep school. This is a sacred moment at the Other Side Village, when somebody arrives at the community and gets to choose their home, the place that they'll have an opportunity to be part of this permanent community. We held a little housewarming party, and she joined the village. Now, the statistic I'm about to share with you is really minor in significance compared to everything else I've shared, but it matters, so we measure it. When people arrive at the village, they have an average of about $108 in income from who knows what kind of sources. When they graduate from the prep school, they're producing $2,600. People are buying cars. People are going on vacations. People are experiencing things that they didn't imagine were possible before. So how do we succeed? Number one, please, any of you that have influence, hold providers accountable for outcomes, not activities. Don't buy the BS of anecdotes ever again. The entire nonprofit sector needs to be transformed, and it will kick and scream and complain when you start to do it, but it's healthy pain because it's a human problem. Don't confuse human problems with asset problems. And finally, confront the bigotry of low expectations. Thank you very much. Thank you. So our belief is not just that a village needs to be built, but that a model needs to be established. So just to share the larger vision, we hope to hold a disruptive conversation with the entire service system in the United States. But it has to begin with a demonstration project, a project that shows what's possible when you transcend the bigotry of low expectations. And we hope that we're well on the way to doing that. So with that, happy to answer any questions that you've got. Please. Yes.
What happens to the 15%? How do you handle that emotion?
Yeah. So he says 85% graduate from the prep school. What happens to the 15% and how do we handle it emotionally? This is the most heartbreaking work I've ever done. We bury people. We have friends and loved ones. We've had somewhere around 36 funerals in the last 11 years. And it is heartbreaking, and I have no way around that other than to feel it. It hurts. It hurts bad. Of the 15% that leave and go back to the streets, a significant number after a number of months come back. And so what we find is now that they've got a comparison point and they can compare life before with life in the prep school, many find their way back, and those are wonderful, joyful moments too. And so we do our best to try to just continue to reach out and pull people back in when we can. But generally they're heading back to the streets. Other questions? I can't see very well, so shout it out if you're raising your hand. Got one way in the back. There's two there. Go for it.
Just out of genuine curiosity, how many years of prep work did this take?
How many years what?
Of prep work did this take before
Good question. So how many years of prep work did it take? It took about 55 years of just learning. And so, Tim Stay and Sela and myself, we've been poring over and learning kind of basic things that prepared us, I think, to think about these problems. And then we found models out there. But we have not finished learning. We've literally traveled the world trying to find every place that might be doing something better than we are. We've been to Europe, we've been to Asia, we've been to South America, North America, we've been everywhere, and we'll continue to look because we measure outcomes, and so we know where we fall short. We know there's 15% we're failing with. And so we're constantly looking at that and saying who's doing better during the first 2 weeks of the induction period. and trying to learn as well. So the setup, in direct answer to your question, we announced our intention to build the village in 2021, is that right? So it's been about 5 years to get where we are. A lot of that was just bureaucratic time. It was about zoning changes, building support with the neighbors and things like that, but not actually building homes. So it's wonderful to be at that point now. Yes?
How much did it cost to build the village, and how did you fund that?
Yeah, so the village is not completed yet. We're in the process now. Each home, fully loaded, costs about $140,000. So you do the math, 140,000 times 460 homes, and that's going to be the ultimate cost of the village. The funding has come from people who are sick and tired of a system that doesn't work. So there are so many that have been pouring money into systems that come back year after year after year for more money, more money. This is a model where when we fundraise, people realize they're writing a capital check, not an operations check. And once the village is built, the village is responsible to be self-reliant, so we won't be coming back anymore to ask for that kind of support. It's the best fundraising ever to be able to do. In fact, I'll share with you, we haven't talked about the Other Side Academy. There was a group called 100 Women Who Care who donated the first money to help us purchase our first moving truck for one of our social enterprises, the Other Side Movers. They donated $10,000. We bought that truck, and we were able to go back 7 years later and explain to them that that truck had generated $5 million in revenue to support the Other Side Academy. It's easy to fundraise when it's a self-reliant community. People believe in that approach. Please.
Will they ever reach the point of like paying rent or earning equity in the homes they move into?
He's asking, will they ever reach the point of paying rent or earning equity in the homes? So rent, yes, equity, no. As soon as they move into the village, they're paying rent. So we have 100% employment in the village. And that's been a remarkable achievement too. So we wondered if people graduated the prep school, if the lure of that easy money from the government, Social Security disability income, would cause some to just say, I don't want to go work at the donut store or the hotel or the goodies business or anything like that. I don't want to do that. 100% have kept their jobs. You know, some have left one job and moved to another job, but they love employment because they've solved the human problem. They've actually developed the muscle again to be able to focus on a task and be in a stressful environment, and it's enjoyable. It's what keeps all of us excited about entrepreneurship too. So as far as earning equity goes, these are the homes will always be owned by the village. That's necessary for us to create the accountability culture. Otherwise, if somebody relapses or has struggles or problems, then we have that in the village. And if drugs get into the village once, it's off and running. So it's important for us to control the living environment. Please.
So these type of social problems are, like, they're not for the weak of heart. And I think there's a lot of people who don't do it because this is just a hard problem. Can you tell me about the moment in your life where you realized that this is something you really wanted to get into, or what gave you the confidence that you could actually do something meaningful here?
Yeah, so he says these are hard problems. This is what's interesting. So I want to throw that back not just at you, but at the group. Because how many of you are involved in some startup or business entrepreneurial activity now? Raise your hands. Come on, raise them up. So a lot of us, right? Are those easy? So what's ironic is when it's our business career, we tend to think, I need to think hard about this. I need to do a lot of analysis. I need to be really careful about how I approach the market, create a minimum viable product, and test it out there. We do all of that. And then we get into philanthropy and we suspend all of our rationality. We just don't do it anymore. Yeah, they're hard problems, but they're not harder than the problems you're solving in launching other businesses. They just require thought. They require us to sit down and be careful about how we frame it and test our solutions and hold ourselves accountable for outcomes. I just don't get it why somebody writes $1 million check to an organization whose website says we gave out 10,000 socks last year. And so all I would encourage you to do is recognize it's going to be the same level of difficulty as all the other problems you've solved in your life. And so step up to it. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to win at this. It's way more wonderful to win at this than it was to all the other stuff I've done in my career. And I did stuff that I love too. So, yeah, don't be a wimp. Please, way in the back.
So, in a room full of young people, what would you tell them that you learned about creating a culture in a family and in your workplace?
Wow. She's saying, what have I learned with the work that we've done about how to create a culture in a family? We, through the Other Side Leadership Institute, offer business training and how to create a culture of accountability. To me, one of the things I wish I had done better at as a dad, and I think I'm doing better at today than I ever have before, but a lot of my mistakes trace back to this. It's just creating a climate, a culture within the family where people express themselves honestly and openly. And if I had done better at that, I think we might have avoided some of the problems that we had in my family. And so I think in a couple's relationship as well, creating agreements and a social compact that we will always make it safe for one another to be able to express what's going on for us. When all of the information and the perspectives are out in the open, we tend to be able to solve the real problem, and we create more of a sense of unity and trust. And that's what we work hardest on at the Other Side Village and the Other Side Academy as well. If you want any help with that, I wrote a book called Crucial Conversations. You can go look that up too. But I can write it. It's a struggle to do it. Yes.
Are you hoping to expand to other states, maybe?
She's asking, are we hoping to expand to other states? Our intention is for this to be a disruptive model. So we need to get to a certain scale at the Other Side Village, and we think at about 150 homes. That's enough scale that the data will be pretty compelling. And from there, what we want is to take that decision. You can imagine if you went to the San Franciscos and Portlands and Seattles and said there's a model where it costs the city nothing, where people's lives are permanently changed, and where the neighbors love it. Would you be interested? There's not a city in the world that won't want to know that, and the kind of boosterism that will probably occur in those cities as the word gets out will help draw it in. Our intention is for this to be a teaching hospital, for this to be a place where contingents from different cities can come, and they'll have an immersive opportunity to learn the model, to take it back, and then we'll provide consulting and help so that they can grow it. So we want the model to diffuse and feel some responsibility to do that. We're holding back on national publicity because we want the scale to happen first. But this Saturday at 12 o'clock, between the morning and afternoon general conference sessions, if you know what those are. So at 12 o'clock, there will be a documentary about the Other Side Academy. So the Academy is mature enough that that story can be told, and you'll see a great example of that storytelling this Saturday at noon. Encourage you to check that out. Please.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, so these people come to the village and their lives are changed. At some point, are they going to move out of the village and get other jobs and live outside of like that close-knit community? Is that a goal, or is it like are they just going to stay there?
Yeah, he's asking, do people move out of the village or do they stay forever? So every one of the people in the village struggles with severe mental health challenges. And so we want the village to be such a place that people might want to stay there for the rest of your life. But they don't have to. And we've already had a couple move out that are thriving and doing well somewhere else. However, if I've struggled with schizophrenia, for example, for 25 years, and as a consequence of that, just trying to get out of the madness of my life, I started to use heroin. And then I've been traumatized on the street, and then I've committed crimes, and now I'm affiliated with different people, and so I've got all this stuff going on. Oftentimes, the best path for me to maintain these new habits that I have this fragile hold on is to be in a place where others are trying to do the same thing and get that support. So we want the village to be a place that will, if people want that support for the rest of their lives, will be in a like-minded community of people that have a sense of shared purpose. There is pride and dignity in the population that lives in the village. This isn't a pathetic place for a bunch of broken folks. In fact, our fundamental belief is that the definition of leadership is helping a group of imperfect people accomplish extraordinary things. And I think our community does it better than most any organization in the world. It has nothing to do with whether or not you got mental health challenges. And so what we do there, people are proud of, fiercely proud of, and I think that many will want to stay for a very long time. But all the paths are available. Please. Well, let's see. I'll take this in the back because I think I've been missing you. Go.
In some situations, some homeless people have kids or dogs on the streets as well. How would you handle that situation?
Yeah, so she says people that have kids and dogs, how do we handle that? So first of all, with pets, pets are allowed in the village. And so it's a friendly environment, supportive of that. As far as kids go, we had to decide in building the village a specific population we would serve, which means we exclude some that don't fit that profile, not because they don't deserve the same option. But we believe that there ought to be villages built that have families and children in them. we tend to have older adults that don't have children, and so it's tricky to try to introduce small children in a community like that. So we kind of specialize, because the vast majority of the toughest to serve are people who are living singly on the streets. And so that's our focus for now. But we hope that somebody's going to raise their hand and say, I want to build the family village, and we'll teach them how to do that, and they'll be off and running as well. Please.
Something I'm getting from this message is that, like, you want to empower people to do it themselves. So how do you get someone to want to change their life? Like, what's the first step in changing their perspective?
Yeah, she's asking, how do you get somebody to want to change? So, because that's a precondition of participating. What I've learned in life, and take notes on this, because this is a hard-earned lesson. You can't make somebody want to change, but you can make them not want to change. Most of what we do that tries to affect people, help encourage people to change, slows them down rather than speeding them up. All you can do is get out of their way and let the natural consequences of life motivate the change. And so when you and I remove the natural consequences of life, when somebody gets arrested for the third time and we hire a lawyer another time to get them bounced out of jail a little bit faster, when in fact they did throw a brick through a store window and probably ought to sit in jail for 3 or 4 months, what you and I tend to do is actually slow down the change process. So can we accelerate it? No, but we can absolutely decelerate it. And most of what loved ones and family do is decelerate it. So this isn't a heartless approach to life, but I've got 160 friends at the Other Side Academy who would tell you that getting arrested was the best thing that ever happened to them. Because finally, the pain of changing was less than the pain of not changing. There was finally an arithmetic there, a motivational arithmetic that got them to the point of saying, crap, I'm going to do a 15-year prison sentence. The Other Side Academy is 2.5 years long. The math works. I'm going to go do this. And somewhere along the way, the magic hits, and they start realizing, wow, who cares about the 15-year sentence? I like my life now. So get out of their way.
One more question. Anyone else?
Please.
When you were preparing your message, what I guess inspired you that this is what students at Utah State needed to hear about? What was your purpose in presenting this to them?
He's asking, when I was preparing it, why did I think this was good for Utah State? Is that feedback? Because of where you're at in life. And I have so much conviction that we can be doing so much better. The massive resources that we're putting into trying to improve lives that are producing just minuscule results. It's a tragedy. And it's not just a tragedy because we're wasting money. It's a tragedy because we're destroying lives. And so I see you as the future captains of industry. I see you as people who will be policymakers. And I'm hoping some of you will remember something I've said tonight so that the future looks better than the past. Thank you very much.